Hello.
Woo!
Here we go again. I'm Sarah, and this is Stacy, who's
Hello.
been studying with me for 6 years and has done a lot of her own studies before meeting me. And this is Apple, who's been studying with me since she was 9, but recalls meeting me quite a lot earlier than that in her visions when she was in the Philippines. So it was like a reunion when we met.
Yeah.
So we often have conversations like this, but we don't always share them. But people have been asking a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And we've been discussing that it would be great to share the perspective of people who've been around me a while in this lifetime. So the antidote was the title we came to because we want to share a different viewpoint than what people are used to on many topics. And the antidote to things staying ever the same and not evolving, the antidote is questioning and bringing in new perspectives. So that's what we're trying to do here. So what would you guys like to talk about today and create an antidote to?
So I think what's been on our minds, on my mind anyway, is the idea that when you are a spiritual person or you're doing spiritual practices, that anything goes. And I myself personally get in trouble, or I don't know what the other word is, in trouble, or help me out with the word here, Apple.
I don't know if you get in trouble, but it's more so like, what do you do in situations where it's like free flowing?
Yeah, or free for all.
Free for all.
When you know better.
Yeah.
So that's the space I'm in right now.
The question is, what do you do when situations become a free-for-all and you're there and you don't know what to do?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that very much depends upon the nature of the setting. If you're out in a nightclub with a bunch of friends and somebody's acting inappropriately and the boundaries are terrible, unless it affects you in a negative way personally, it's really not a time and place where you have any authority to give even an opinion unless it's asked. But if you're in a setting like a spiritual circle, and even if someone else is leading it, and you see things going on that you know are unsafe and a free-for-all, the person with the most maturity and knowledge has a responsibility. So that's really something you have to feel intuitively. Apple sees me advising people who run businesses and laboratories and all different kinds, doctors' offices, many different fields. What do you know that I tell people about this?
I feel like you let people build up the courage. So when the same situation appears again, they have then the courage to finally speak their voice. Because most of the time, I think people come to you in frantic. I have certainly come to you when I'm like, what the fuck is happening out there? And what is this going on? And this person's doing this. And, I felt like, first of all, the first situation you do is to calm me down. Most people, I think like you're constantly picking up emergencies, and it's just really people freaking out in situations they don't know how to handle. So I feel like that's step one with you.
Okay, so step the first is calm down and size up the situation. And why are you so upset about what you did or didn't do in the situation?
Yeah. And then I feel like you kind of help lead the person to know their own truth and their own voice. And whatever that is, that's inside of them that feels the truth, and they're just scared to face it or speak of it.
So the second step that you notice I help people with is to feel what their role is, what they feel responsible for, and how they feel comfortable putting it out to the other people involved in the situation.
Right, yeah. And then you'll see it won't be tomorrow. It may not even be next week. it might be like a year or two where they come face a very similar situation and then they get to speak it. Or sometimes it's not that, they repeat it again and again, and then finally they get a chance to say what they really do feel inside. That is right for them and for the other person, because I feel that you are all about making sure people are safe and that it's the right thing to do for all parties involved.
Right. And I don't think it matters whether you're leading a spiritual circle or you have a place of authority in an office with other people, or you're witnessing the conduct of higher people in an organization towards the people in service there. There's a responsibility if you have spiritual knowledge and you've done some training, there is a point of view. And whether you say anything or don't say anything, people become more and more upset if they see injustice and don't do anything. So they come to me when they're feeling already bad about that. And everybody goes through that. I go through that. Like, do I say something? I think it's really an individual journey to figure out when you put your awareness and knowledge and power to influence out in the open. So how does that show up in your world?
Well, mostly it shows up in my world as people coming into spiritual circles or places or groups, ceremonies where they think anything goes. And sometimes it has really been very difficult for me personally to speak up and say something, especially if I'm not the person leading the group. And then it's up to me whether or not I remain with that group, or if I leave.
So what is your question about that? Because the difficulty of standing up for what's fair, right, just, when people are acting like anything goes. A lot of spiritual practices and communities just feel like that free flow is a really higher level. It's not really.
No, it's not. Actually, I feel that when things are very high level, they're much more ordered. They're much more respectful of everybody who comes to the gathering. My question is really, what to do in situations when you are not the one sort of leading the group. I think my default has been to exit myself.
To leave.
Yeah.
That's always an option.
Yeah. But also well, you mentioned a loaded word before, but power, right? So this idea of having spiritual power. And so in that sense where I don't necessarily, or the person doesn't necessarily feel like they have the power, right? You also mentioned like doing your work is applicable in even an office space,
Everywhere.
right?
Yeah,
Everywhere.
Okay.
So,
depending on your level of confidence,
Yeah.
everywhere in this world, people are all over the place, behaving in any ways they think are okay. And I have had to practice and work very hard to put an energy out into the space that says, by degrees, not cool, really not cool.
Mhm.
I wouldn't do that if I were you. Would you like to be able to discuss this in person? Like, you can do all of that without saying a word. So I feel that if you're in a spiritual circle and there's things going on that are just bullshit,
Yeah.
it's important that your attitude reflected, that you don't sit there being all nice anywhere, that you feel someone's being incredibly arrogant and careless with other people, especially when other people are vulnerable. The one who has the most knowledge and responsibility is the person who knows. So let's assume the person leading that circle or in that office or wherever there's problems doesn't really know that what they're doing is very chaotic and bad. If you don't show your discontent and give them an edge that says, not so good.
Right.
I could give you a warning shot, but I might say something. I often just give people a signal like that if they don't do a course correction spontaneously, I'll help.
Okay.
And I'm in a lot of spiritual circles. Mostly I say nothing. But if you see me backing to the back of the room, it doesn't mean I'm not gonna say something at a quiet moment when nobody else is there. You said you saw me a long time ago in a spiritual circle writing down some things.
Yeah.
That's before you met me.
Yeah.
I was writing down some things because the person guiding the group was doing a great job with certain things, but there were pieces falling through the cracks and people in a lot of emotional crisis. So I simply wrote it down so that I could send healing to that person. And if they approached me, I would be aware of what the problem was ahead of time. I wasn't going to go humping down and tell on anybody, but you've got to have choices like to do something. So in your situations where you're working with theater people and in settings that aren't exactly healing settings, how are you finding you need to apply this?
I'm actually mostly quiet, if surprisingly. There have been moments where I have had to quietly, separately text, or I actually have had to either remove myself completely because it might be too volatile. Like it's too much.
Right.
Like if you say something, it might escalate more or something of that nature. So I literally have to be like, I don't think it's a good idea for me to be in this setting. And it's not even me. It's like I'm literally, you could just tell I'm being removed from the situation at hand because one, we have other things to do. My being or my energy cannot be tied up in that situation.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let me see if I'm understanding.
Okay.
You're sometimes noticing that you're being messed with, and you either could send a text or something privately, or just stay quiet because you can't afford to let your energy be tapped out by that situation because
Yeah.
we've got other things to do.
Yeah, I think my attention needs to be elsewhere for that moment, but I know that there will be a chance down the road. I think that's been happening, like it might not be today or it might not be tomorrow, and I have to remove myself, but there will be a chance where you could say what you have to say.
So what I'm hearing you say
Yeah.
is even though in the moment, rather than start a whole thing, you take note of what isn't good.
Yeah.
And you know that sooner or later, you will get your chance to have that conversation or do something to correct the situation.
Right.
Yes, I think that happens a lot. Like seems like there's always another opportunity that comes along that will give you that opportunity, or that you'll be able to tap into your own power to then address the situation for sure.